Ben, what is making property news?
All right, let's see if I can try and keep calm about this, Bryce, because obviously I've been let down. I've been let down and lied to by my government of the day. And it doesn't matter, Labor or Liberal, but I still, I've been sold false promises. And then ultimately they've changed their messaging around the political element of basically buying votes. And so the biggest challenge for me and the frustration on that is that this backflip can also set an agenda to potentially backflip on policies like negative gearing and those types of things as well. So I am fearful of any Labor Greens government around their negative gearing policy. I always will be, because it's clear that they can tell you one thing and then turn around and lie to you and then change that view. But I also thought it would be really important to just give people context. I asked a couple of people in the office in terms of sampling how much tax people think they paid, and a lot of people really just don't know how much tax is actually being paid by people on different pay scales. So I just wanted to share a bit of knowledge here for those people, and then I'm going to do a fairness test just so everyone can understand this. So currently, in the current 22-23 and this tax season, if you're on $70,000, and what I've done is I've stripped out all of the assessable income, any deductions, I've taken the Medicare levy out and any other surcharges. The model doesn't account for any help or HECS debt payments that are being made. So just clean PAYG tax scale. If I'm earning $70,000, I'm paying $13,217 in tax. Now, if I'm earning double that, so $140,000, now the average wage across Australia now is sitting at around, I think, $95,000, right? So we're not sort of saying that these are big incomes, but if at $70,000 I'm paying $13,000 in tax. At $140,000, I'm paying $36,867 in tax. So that's 179% more than someone on that lower tax scale, right? Now, before the government made these changes, I just wanted to highlight that the change would mean that they would only pay 166% more than what they're currently paying. Now, let's look at some higher income earners for context there as well. And so for $100,000 of income, I'm effectively paying today $22,967 versus someone on $200,000, they're paying $60,667. So that's $37,700 more, or 164% more. Now, obviously that goes to aspiration and people working really hard, but the way in which the politicians like to position this story and the media doesn't get really into the nuts and bolts of it. I just want to share two stories with you, two typical household stories to sort of give context around how fair these changes are, okay? So household one is a family household. They're in their mid-30s. They're millennials. They've got two kids, and they just happen to have one person who's gone to university, studied really hard, and they've got one high-income earner who earns $200,000. Now, they've worked hard to save, and that this current home that they recently bought in the last 12 months is now worth 1.8 million, but it wasn't their first home. They've built up to that. Obviously, kids are growing, and so they're aspirational. They want to have lifestyle by design.
Paid a couple of stamp duties along the way, Ben.
Yeah, they pay double stamp duties for each of those properties, right? And so they're now they've got a mortgage of $850,000, which isn't unreasonable for a property of 1.8 million. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, they've seen interest rate rise those 13 times. And so just in the interest cost alone, which has increased by 4.25%, the interest cost alone is now costing them on their $850,000 loan $36,125 more. Those stage 3 tax cuts for that family were going to be a $9,075 benefit to them to reduce that $36,000 of additional cost that they had. But based on the changes that have been made for this millennial family, who's also had to pay for university fees and has also had to go through all of that, those challenges of saving for a deposit for higher cost of property. So their cost of living benefit has obviously just lost them $4,500 to support their family and to support their higher income payments. Now, that is also not factoring in the 2% Medicare levy that they would also be charged, which is the equivalent of $4,000. So under the new regime of tax, they are going to be paying $60,138 in tax if they don't do anything to reduce their tax. Okay, I'll come back to that point. Now, let's also look at another couple that might be living in the same capital city across Australia. This couple are in their mid-70s. They got free university and they pretty much had free healthcare right through their journey. They also have got a $2.5 million property in a capital city household, and they're enjoying the benefits of having their savings now earning significantly higher interest earning on their savings in the bank because term deposits are now sitting around 4.5%. So they're debt-free on their home, worth $2.5 million, and they've just got an $800 windfall based on these tax changes that have been made by the government. So that is where we talk about fairness and reasonableness. Does this pass the reasonableness test in terms of how much tax people are paying? Now, I've always said everyone should pay less tax because I also believe that government should spend less. Okay, I think in terms of I absolutely are really strong on make sure that there's a reasonable safety net and to look after those most vulnerable in our community. But we continually keep running the risk of potentially increasing welfare to middle class. And so these people aren't incentivized to get out and work. And so from my point of view, that's about, basically giving rather than receiving. And all of us, I'm very happy to pay my taxes and very happy to pay a fair share, but that just gives you some context around what that looks like. So I just find it frustrating that the government of the day, the politicians, will continue to do popular politics, and that over the medium to longer term, in terms of our state building and our nation building, actually makes us lethargic and lazy and ultimately susceptible to more difficult economic challenges in the future. And so that's going to be a problem for us. And so I'm flagging that now. If you're listening to this in 20 or 30 years' time, you'll know what I mean if we keep up this process. And if you're interested in looking at historical challenges that states face, go and read up about Argentina's story. Go and read up about how Argentina was once one of the top nations and wealthiest nations in the world that had some of the most beautiful culture building, and they completely destroyed their country and their economy through poor governance and over bureaucracy, and basically thinking that they're going to help people by continuing to keep giving them more and more and getting themselves into record levels of debt. And now they've got hyperinflation. So if you want to have a look at a history about how you destroy a nation that has natural resources, critical landmass, is located in one of the most heavily densified population centers in South America in the world, and they can't be successful, well, that's on the decisions that the governments of the day are making. So please look out for that, because I think there's some important life lessons and history lessons that you can learn from that.
So there's a logical thought thread that you've gone through, Ben. I must admit, when that happened, I was torn, right, between, if they're distributing it to people who need it for cost of living pressures. The short term of that makes sense to me, right? And I probably never ever thought the stage 3 tax cuts were going to go through as legislated anyway.
Nor did I.
So from a personal perspective, I'm annoyed because it means that I don't get the kick that I was hoping to get. But from a short-term perspective, I think the distribution to people who are really struggling now, including some people who are listening to this podcast, be really struggling and be really grateful for the extra kick that they get. So that's on one side.
Yep.
But I think if one of the things we're talking about in this podcast is getting people to have long-term thinking, I think that's helped me. Okay, short-term makes sense. Got it. Politics at play. There's a by-election coming up. All that makes sense why they did it. And it's inflationary and all those sorts of things, where arguably some of those pay brackets that are getting the money have historically shown that they spend it straight away versus not spending it straight away, which adds to inflation. Yeah. I'm sure we can go down 1,000 rabbit warrens, but I think it's the long-term thinking to your argument around we are an aspirational country. And if we go back to my point about the S&Me 500, we're trying to encourage everyone to develop skills so that they can actually layer their income so that it's not fixed as well, so that they can get themselves into an aspirational tax bracket as well, so that they would have been the long-term beneficiaries, which means that they can provide housing and all the multiplier effect of that. But what I think is really the most frustrating thing is around the narrative of people that are on those higher incomes being some unicorn or got some magic dust or some form of fantasy around what those people are. Because I think to your story, some people in Western Australia might go, oh, boo-hoo, $1.8 million property with an $850,000 mortgage. They might not be able to relate to that because the real estate prices are different there. But if you're on the East Coast, that is not what's untypical? What's the word for untypical? Untypical be fine for now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's the bit that I think I've settled on around. We've got to still promote the aspiration in this country for people to. We do live on the greatest show on earth. We have, and so the tax system is the price that we pay to live in this wonderful country. So therefore, people should pay. But in terms of what we are talking about here, I think it's more about the medium and long-term thinking. You still want to incentivize folks and not demonize the folks that are on who have had a go, invested in their skills. Those skills have returned dividends on the amount of income that they can get. Because if someone's on 500 plus, 600 plus, 700 plus, that's a pretty outlier income. But someone on 200,000 in this country with a mortgage like what you described, they're not having caviar and eating at fine dining and all that sort of time. They're just trying, and sure, they might have private school fees and all that sort of stuff where some people can't do that, but I get it. But we've still got to be able to let people have that aspiration to invest in themselves, invest in their skills, and as a result, climb up the income ladder without being labelled as someone who's living a life of excess. Because generally, most people in that bracket are just still trying to make ends meet too.
Yeah, we've got a problem with our tax system and the fact that we're so reliant on personal income tax. I think it constitutes around sort of 50 to 55% of all generation of our income. So that's not where it should be. A consumption tax should be higher, and we should then obviously then eliminate sort of stamp duties for mobility. So if you think about it from an economic point of view and productivity point of view, we've got it the wrong way around. Like we're all saying, yeah, we all want higher salaries and we want to keep as much of our income as we earn. But if we don't actually produce anything more for that, and we expect to continually keep getting that, then that's where eventually, as I'm saying, your nation starts to become stagnant, lethargic, and ultimately in terms of your standard of living and your lifestyle and all that, that starts to deteriorate. And that's what we see over 120 years in Argentina, from being in the top 10 countries in the world in terms of its riches and quality and standard of living per capita, is now down at like 140th, and they're a basket case. So you don't want to get yourself in a situation. And I'm not saying that politicians don't think that they're trying to do the right thing, but I come back to, the ownership of your situation. Like, let's put it into human terms. If little Johnny keeps making mistakes, but everyone keeps supporting little Johnny, and so he just keeps making those same mistakes, but we think we're doing the right thing by supporting him. The best thing we can do for little Johnny is actually let him learn from those mistakes and then change his habits and behaviour. So as much as in most cases the thought bubbles come from a place of goodwill and good intent in terms of, taking from the rich and giving to the poor, what you're actually doing is not teaching them any values or behaviours. They're just going to continue, which is what happened in Argentina. They just continue to listen to the next politician that came along and said, I'll fix this for you. I'll give you more. You guys will have everything that you need. Just trust me on this. I've got all and they do. And they vote for these people. And then ultimately, they've got no economic fundamentals or drivers. The best way in which you can continue to keep taking people out of a lower standard of living into the best standard of living is to grow the economic pie, to track the best and brightest to do the work that they need to do. And if you're not doing that, then effectively, if you're not growing and you're stagnating, then effectively your economy is dying. And then you don't have those revenues that are coming in. And that means your debt levels keep going up higher. And then there is a point of no return, which was seen Argentina hit 5 times over the last 120 years, where they've had to be bailed out and their economies are completely basket cases. So that's my fear in terms of where we're going. And so that's just giving context for people who may not have understood exactly how much is being paid. Now, full stop, new sentence. You have an opportunity to choose how much tax you pay based on the activities that you do. So in other words, there's tax deductible ways in which you can legally reduce your income. You've got to obviously look at superannuation and making sure that you're paying as much of the additional contributions as you can potentially into super, because that's effectively a better tax vehicle for you. So we're in the business of wealth creation and helping aspiring Australians. And so we make no apologies for that. So that's obviously one way in which you can do that. Now, of course, if you want to start a small business, potentially that allows you to claim tax deductions, I said it earlier, the best small business that I think you can start is to invest in property. Now, you wouldn't invest in property to get that tax deduction, but ultimately, I can tell you that the $4,500 you just lost in terms of the government in doing that, you can potentially regain that in the short term. And I want to stress this, in the short term, we can reduce your tax if you have a negatively geared property. So come and talk to us. We might have something to offer you here. But in the long term, I also guarantee you will be paying more tax off the greater wealth that you've created. And there's no problem with that. So as that property moves from negative geared to neutrally geared to positively geared, you will be paying some of that as tax. And I think that's fair enough. But in the short term, if you're disappointed with not being able to get the advantages that you should, we know what super mega wealthy rich people do. They offshore their money into tax havens and try and avoid tax as much as possible. I'm saying for the mum and dad, professional couple, time poor couple who want to get ahead, then investing in property is potentially one of those ways. So consider that in the start of 2024 as one of those solutions. And we'd be happy to run you through the modelling to show you exactly what you could make or could save.
Yeah, well said, mate. So as we turn to home on the back of that fired up process from you in What's Making Property News, Ben, we said if you stick around, we're going to give you free gifts. So here it is. We want to give out free reports to our community, suburb reports that give an enormous amount of data, which is all the richness of the data that we've collected over the journey, Ben. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/property report, or one word, or lowercase, Ben, thepropertycouch.com.au/property report. You can go there and you can download a free report, Ben. And so there you go. We're giving the free gifts. Now, here's a couple of things that I need to say. Probably only one, really. There's been a ton of changes in the email space. So what's going to happen is when you get to that landing page, you're going to leave your details, and we're not going to send it to you until you receive an email and confirm the email is okay. I'm just apologising in advance. That is not from us, folks. That is because of all the behemoths, the Googles and the Hotmails and all the Microsofts. Everything have tightened up email deliverability. So, folks, just letting you know, you'll go to a landing page, you'll leave your details. It'll ask you to get an email. You'll have to confirm the email. Then we'll send the report to you. Please don't shoot the messenger. That is just what we have to do to get it to you. But if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/property report, you can get a free report. And check it out, folks. The level of detail is enormous.
Well,
Ben, we are getting very close to winding up. You got one more thing to say about the More platform?
Well, to your point there, the juice is worth the squeeze. So if that's all you've got to do in terms of confirming your email, back to the point, the amount of content and rich information in our brand new property reports is going to blow you away. And so we are going to make those property reports available to our community. We're on our mission to continually keep building out that community, and we are giving them away for free. Information that we use in our own business, and they're available completely free for you to be able to access as well.
So we charge $50 for these reports, Ben.
Well, we still do charge in certain aspects for $40 for these reports. So that's exactly right. But for our community, they're free. And so, it's really important for you to take advantage of that. Finally, on the More platform, we will talk about this in a couple of weeks in a lot more detail. But over the last week, we promised this at the end of the summer series, we have gone live on a critical and significant new introduction of a feature called historical tracking. And that is the ability to basically have a time machine with historical data around your situation. So there is nothing more powerful than the new information that we've put into the More platform, where you are going to get historical insights. But there's nothing more frustrating than having those in an old spreadsheet. You can put all of that information in and have all of that backdata report, and you're now in the cloud. And that will be available for you in terms of running that. So we will talk in a lot more detail, but if you haven't checked out the new card, the financial cards, and now this historical tracking capability, or if you haven't been in your portal for a while, we've moved millions of data points and restructured them into, these historical tracking stories. And so now you're going to get all of this rich information at the card level as well. So it's one of the most significant upgrades that we have made to the platform, and there's more to come.
We are coming hard for property investors to provide a platform for you to serve you as a property investor. So go and check that out, folks. There's a lot of really cool stuff to come, mate. So we have covered a lot of ground
Epic
today,
first
Ben.
episode of the year outside of
Well,
summer
first
series.
back from summer series,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, but folks, February is a big month for us. We're excited to deliver the content to you this month. So stick around and help us get to 100,000 subscribers this year. We would be eternally grateful for your help with that, mate. But until next week, Ben.
Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it.
Right, well said, I think. See you next week, folks.